On. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Make Love Easy podcast. I, uh, you know, it's been a long time since OneTaste went down, and there's been a lot of takes on it. And I'm
hmm
excited to get a high-level take from someone who's unabashedly shared his really intriguing journey. Welcome. Is it Ruwan?
Ruwan, yep.
All right, cool, man. Tell me your story, man. What if you want to summarize a little teaser trailer for the book?
Yeah. Well, I'll summarize it because I guess you read the book, or most of it, I assume. Yeah, I discovered One Taste when I was a younger, confused, anxious man looking for answers, both when it came to relating to women, but also kind of as like a bigger, like how do I relate to life? Like how do I, you could say I had a, one way to put it is I had a quarter life crisis, but I think it was more deeper and maybe spiritual in quotes than that. And then I found this group that seemed to have all the answers to all my questions. And in some ways they did. One Taste really taught me a lot about sexuality and connection, and I would say healed certain things about me. But as many people, more people are familiar with, they have a dark side. They had a dark side, and I got to experience a little bit of both with many ethical grays and yeah, I think some life lessons that shocked my morality at least.
I love and have discerned a really strong commitment in your speaking and in your expression to dignify and honor what was workable or useful
Mm.
or supportive, nourishing, nurturing, uplifting to you on your journey from that which was sort of tainted by ego and shadow. So my
Yeah, I
curiosity, yeah, go ahead.
yeah I get a lot of I get a lot of hate for that, or I get a lot of heat for that. Sometimes I've gotten hate mail, but like just because I do want to, I mean, I do want to. It's many directions I could go with this, but I think it's kind of lazy thinking to say, oh, they did bad things, so everything was bad,
Yeah.
or they helped people, so everything was good. I think both are lazy ways to put them in boxes or put life in boxes. Like nothing really is good or bad. We could go philosophical there,
Hmm.
not completely at least, but yeah, I went in and I did grow a lot from the experience, and I want to give credit where it's due. And they also showed me things about life and sexuality and connection and the human experience that I believe are unique. I've only been in one cult. Maybe every cult has answers like this, but this was my experience of like there was, especially as a 23-year-old guy, and I was a little more naive, some things that were really profound to me, at least then and a little bit now too. And that is the truth, even though they also did some very not cool things, like very terrible things to other people. I won't say I was victimized in the way other people were at all, but I saw some negative things, certainly.
Yeah, so what were the best and what were the worst for you?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I mean, I did grow a lot sexually. I think I developed. This is kind of fresh in my head because I was just writing about it, but most men are in sexual scarcity. Our culture reinforces this idea that men are in scarcity, on top of men actually being in scarcity. It's simply like they're not getting as much. It's not even just sex, but female validation as most straight men would like. Um, and in One Taste, I got an experience somewhat artificial of really filling my cup, not
Mm.
just sexually, but also with validation and connection and love. And like how much it was real versus not real is also kind of a gray area, but I got the experience of my cup being full, which other than really just having a lot of sexual experiences, I don't know that I would have gotten that kind of, it might sound weird to put this word in this sentence, but nurturing, like really filling a certain kind of void in my self-worth as a man who had gotten a lot of rejection as a younger man. And I would say for me personally, that was part of the best experience. I also made other like just friendships that are still some of my closest friendships to this day. Also, um, the worst, I'll say I didn't experience the worst that they dished out. Like some, particularly women that I knew that I was acquainted with and friends with, like really experienced traumatizing events. I wouldn't put myself in that category. I kind of witnessed it though. Um, I mean that's the worst that I saw, but I would say what maybe I was more directly affected by was kind of this jadedness about spirituality. Like it's actually a quote in my book, another character in the book based on a real person says this, is like most people think that if someone can really see into your soul, they must be a good person. And then in one taste, you learned there's some people who have learned to really read a person's soul, and they're not a good person. Like those are two separate things. Like someone could be, they're not a saint just because they have crazy abilities to tell you what you're feeling.
Yeah, insight does not always equal discernment or virtue.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have so much to relate to. I don't know if you can read this part, but my book last year was not full on trying to attack or, and I wouldn't say you ever are trying to attack, but it's like to publicly discern, distinguish, call out or call in kind of an authority structure in this way. And what I'm struck by in your work is there's this commitment to um, appreciating that we need belonging, that
Hmm.
it's a non-negotiable, and that it's okay to seek it, it's okay to receive it, it's okay to have it, but not at the expense of trading away your sovereignty.
Yeah.
So for you, um, I'm curious, like, what were the first signs of you losing your own center in the experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you're, coincidental your setup to this is like around the time that I was realizing, wow, there's something I'm getting in this cult, and even then I called it a cult. There's something I'm getting in this cult that feels so nourishing, right? I'm actually in this group of people that where everyone's vulnerable and everyone's connected and like the walls are down in a way that in the self-help world most people theorize about. I'm actually getting to experience that. And because of that though, my mentor in the cult, who's kind of my mother figure, one of the first things she said to me is, I'm going to take away your independence. And I thought it was a joke.
Hmm.
But within 3 months, I mean, if I can be a little self-deprecating, I was her lapdog. You know, I, I, I laughed at the idea of it, and it happened to me all the same. Um, and I think partly was because I did get this nourishing thing. I mean, I have this like evolutionary perspective that cults really do mirror the way that human beings evolved to be in, like a small tribe, 150 people or less, charismatic leader. It's our language, and everyone else is dangerous. And that's what cults do. It seems crazy now, but that's actually how humans were for a very long time, which is why it feels. I truly feel like I felt so good on an emotional level at time without the manipulate before the manipulation, I should say, and because of that, I was willing to, suppress my conscience at different moments and give it my sovereignty.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is it is there sociological or biological data to suggest, and maybe you're aware of this, maybe not, that kind of tribal social existence is in fact in our nature, like what we crave?
I mean, I haven't seen anything definitive other than reading sociological books and like I'm an armchair sociologist. I haven't gone deep in any of these, but like just like the Dunbar's number. We're not meant to have more than 150 friends, but they're supposed to be the closest friends of all time. And then you look at on maybe the other end like how tribalism naturally happens in online when it comes to ideology. Like I think to me that's evidence at least that there's this human drive for these kinds of groups. Like it doesn't feel good to, as much as like there's a spiritual side of me that is like, yeah, we're all, let's connect to everyone, and like we should, I mean, many people have that kind of inclination. It's actually not natural to be
Yeah.
connected to everyone, at least not socially and intimately.
Well, there's a capacity limit, as you pointed to Dunbar's number. I mean, like, and that's like the high end, but at the low end, I think deep, nourishing, intimate relationships. One of my arguments in my coaching is that if you want the fullness of spiritual and emotional nutrition that's available between two nervous systems, you're just not going to be available to give that to multiple people at once or receive that from multiple people at once,
Yeah.
which is this kind of an argument for monogamy. But I believe I'm speaking to a married man.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, my marriage is my first monogamous relationship. From
Oh,
one
wow.
taste on, I did explore every kind of relating. And what was interesting on that is a bit of tangent, but at the time I was there, everyone was in an open relationship. That was the norm of that culture. I think it kind of went in line with maybe what was in vogue in the personal development, the edgy part of personal development, like a lot of people I knew were reading Mating in Captivity and The Ethical Slut and Sex at Dawn and stuff, and I was too. Um, but what was ironic about that is that most people in One Taste were in intimate sexual relationships, romantic relationships with lots of people, but it was all within the umbrella of One Taste. Like you couldn't bring any of those relationships out, and none of them lasted beyond One Taste. And in many cases, One Taste put them together. So you weren't. This is one thing I added this line to my book in my last editing phase. Like none of us were in relationships with each other. We were in relationships with One Taste, and they kind of just paired us up to keep us occupied in a way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've recently observed that in the community that I was a part of. Now
Hmm.
that's more there because of the Christian um, norm of divine union and
Mm.
monogamy, and you put 30 to 50 people in a Costa Rican village that does not really connect to the outside, like a single space, and they're gonna get horny. They're gonna look for connection and love, and you got to get it where it is. So I don't think there's
Yeah.
as much of a top down in what I'm witnessing,
Mm.
but I do I did have the experience of what's united through a community like that. If the community disappears or changes form, or one of the people involved in that relationship leaves the community, then the relationship is very difficult to maintain it.
Yeah. And I had all of those experiences, like where one of my partners left, and then suddenly we were out of love. And I loved her like a month earlier, but then she kind of said no to the cult, and then I was like, oh, I don't have any feelings for her anymore. Weird, like that happened like seemingly overnight. And and pre-existing relationships were never allowed to stay. And I think every cult has that because that's a different reality than the cult, like the set like a pre-existing reality. So it will always threaten, your love story before you join the cult together will always threaten the cult reality. So always those relationships were broken up. People were put together, but it was within the umbrella like we can only be together when we're in the cult. And I actually left with someone, and I think on the one hand, we were able to support each other because we had the same experience of being in the same cults. But, and this is something she and I have talked about years after we broke up, like we were recreating our cult's traumas because we
Yep.
only knew how to be in a relationship where there was a lot of drama. And that
Mm.
was implanted to us in a community where they want you to always be in emotional turmoil, so you can't really think for yourself.
That's interesting. So, I was a part of One Taste for a time. I went to turn-ons, I considered CP, I went to men's groups, and I found it really energizing, inspiring, invigorating, intriguing. Um, and, it left Austin, like the house where people were living, it ceased to exist. And then 2016, 2017 or so, the leadership who I really respected, who I'm still connected with,
Hmm.
who I still respect actually, they told me basically that the organization had collapsed under the undone weight of the shadow work of its founders. And I'm curious, what should people watch for when entering high intimacy or high control communities that claim to or actually have technology supporting people in accelerating awakening? I mean, like, how do you keep your center when playing with fire?
Yeah. With things like this, I did my best to have characters say it in dialogue rather than like have a conclusion. Because honestly,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things I still don't have a clear conclusion on. But a person who I really respect, whose dialogue I put early in the book, is that um, by entering a group like this, by trusting them with your psyche, you're making yourself vulnerable. Like, I don't know if you remember this scene. It's like we just got out of hot yoga, and he was comparing it to hot yoga softens your fascia, which makes you more flexible, so you can be remolded. And One Taste was doing that to us with our psyches in positive ways in the beginning, right? We were learning how to be vulnerable, be safe in expressing, be open to change and stuff. And then, but when you're that vulnerable, you lose your ability to see, you enter a range of motion that you're not able to really control anymore. And that was kind of the game.
Yeah, so here's a piece of it. Like, what what do you do in your current life as a men's coach that took root in Ohm and OneTaste that like how do you serve from what you knew without inducing the experiences that didn't work?
Yeah, I mean, that was a tough one because I started coaching in One Taste. I had clients. When I left One Taste, some clients left with me. Um, but I only knew how to help people with creating dependence. Like we were even taught like towards the end of a coaching session, find some other insecurity to work on, right? But then they're gonna re-up. It's like a never ending. And a lot of coaches do this. It's not just a one taste thing. But I never felt good about that because like what if they came for a certain problem and we fixed it and that's it. Um, so I had to take a break. As far as like what I specifically do, I'm not sure, but I have the sense that I don't create dependency. And also the way I structure my coaching packages now, it's like I don't charge per session, we charge for results, and it takes however long it takes. And I kind of give a lifetime guarantee in a sense
Hmm.
with many kinds of problems. And like that's one way. But I think there's also like a kind of intangible thing that I don't know if I could put into words of like, I'm really trying to have them leave better than I found them. And in One Taste, that wasn't true. It's like you want to make them feel good in a way that they have to come back to you. And maybe they lose their own sense of adult serenity because they need you now as their guru, and that's not healthy.
Well, from what you witnessed, I think you'll probably have a really great answer to this one. Like, is it possible for someone to be consciously, genuinely desiring to support and serve, but unconsciously, like falling asleep at the wheel of their shadow, as it were, or like falling asleep at the wheel because of their shadow, and then pushing people around from subtle unconscious dynamics? Like when you look at Nicole, for example,
Hmm.
I mean, perhaps she started off trying to be of service and trying to make a difference. But what is it? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So
Hmm.
perhaps the the shadow just pulled her aside, and that became kind of the ecosystem of the culture to allow desire, which is really, shadow masked. You tell me, what do you see?
Yeah, well, yeah, high level, and I did even try to include this in the book while making fun of myself a little bit, like because I was it's almost like generational trauma being passed on or generational behaviors, but not literal generations. Like Nicole trained her disciples, one of them was my mentor, and I just like the behavior just passed on. And I would do culty things with other people who were like below me in the power hierarchy, not because I was trying to get money from them. I wasn't earning anything. It was just like repeated behavior, just learned behavior. Like the abused child becomes a bully at school, but in that case, it was more like how much can I get this person to do, or how much can I, light this person up and then get them to do something. And it was kind of, I know for myself, there wasn't malicious intent. I don't believe there was malicious intent in anyone other than maybe Nicole, although I'm not in her head. We were kind of just passing on behaviors that were kind of wired into us because they were beneficial at one point. Um, and yeah, there's one specific behavior that I know I did and I felt bad about shortly afterwards. Was kind of a coaching style in One Taste of telling people that you know better than them about themselves.
Hmm.
And there was a genuine side of this. Like Nicole would do this, and actually a lot of the high level teachers would do this in coaching circles or classes where they just read someone, genuinely empathize with them, and then highlight something that the person maybe couldn't voice. And you can say that's good coaching, right? That's an element of good coaching. But then it becomes accelerated to the point of like when someone's indoctrinated enough and they'll take your shit enough. Well, I know your desires better than you do. Oh, you think you're repulsed by that? No, that's just your resistance speaking. And then it's hard to as a student it's hard to tell. Well, they advised me so well, and they did see some things that were useful. Well, maybe this next thing, maybe I should sleep with that person that repulses me, or maybe I should do this thing with money, and it becomes very hard to tell where the line is.
Huh. At what point specifically, I mean, if you were to generate a principle, does um, this sort of reframing of doubt as resistance or ego become dysfunctional?
That's one of those open-ended things that I don't have a clear. You could speak to the extremes, but I think even if I were to lay out, let's say you could call it like the compliance ladder of a given person, myself or any person I witnessed.
Hmm.
Um, I think you ask 10 different people, 10 people, 10, you'll get 10 different answers on where the line of unethical was.
Hmm.
Some people would say the very first time you got them to do something scary. Other people would say, well, only when they sucked that dick that they didn't want to, but everything else was fine. And like, you know, yeah, anyway.
Ha- So what we're looking at is the nuts and bolts of when and where it went off the rails, really. Because I'm fascinated by power. I'm fascinated by power in sexuality and in community. And our men who listen to the Make Love Easy podcast, they're seeking to find a harmonious, heart-centered balance between heart, head, and cock, between the exercise of their power and the open, compassionate consideration of others. And your work, your journey, I mean, I'm sure has danced with a lot of those.
Yeah. I don't know if I have like a clear answer because it's so subjective and I can even I can even hear my younger self giving you a definitive answer about like, well, if you just really connect with someone or you really empathize, you have to trust that instinct. And there's a part of me that thinks that's true. Like if I'm coaching a guy on flirting, like I would encourage him at some point you have to trust whether it's a green light or a red light. You can't ask every second. Like you have to trust your ability to empathize and hope for the best. But it's very easy for you to kid yourself too, I think.
So, pivoting a little bit to one of the biggest things that you pointed to earlier, how do men get into scarcity? Just like looking at culturally, and then how would you get a man out of scarcity, given what you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, all right, big picture, I think many men are literally like on a literal level they want more sex than they is available to them or more female validation. Actually, I heard this I think Chris Ryan said this, someone I've read whose books I've read, that if a man loses his virginity after 15, he's always going to have some insecurity around beautiful women, which is relatively young, but it's like if you lost your virginity before 15, basically you have puberty, you have great desire, and within a couple years you fulfill that desire. But if you go your teenage years not fulfilling that desire, it creates a feeling of insecurity, which I think is the basis of scarcity. On top of that, then you have culture, society. There's a lot of sex thrown around. These new artificial mechanisms, pornography, now AI pornography, OnlyFans, that I think Tinder only heighten, like, they exacerbate or amplify what would be a natural amount of scarcity. Um, so the perception of scarcity becomes like 10 or 20 or 100x than it would be for our caveman ancestors who didn't get it enough, for instance.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah.
and there's maybe other like, other theories we could place on that. But well, I'm going to think out loud on this, but what I have thought about is how, because I have a son who's 1.5, and I'm like, if I can have him grow up to not feel insecure. If I could have him grow, if I have both of my kids grow up where they don't feel like they need to spend a ton of money on personal development, I would feel like it was worth it. All the personal
Amen.
development. Yeah, yeah.
Amen. Yeah.
As a baseline, right? If my kids can find it boring, is actually like I want my kids to find personal development. I like this kind of. I mean, the OneTaste kind of personal development boring. I should like that's obvious. I know how to connect. I know how to express my feelings. Like I don't want them spending money or spending their life on that. Otherwise, Anyway, um, I would want him to really understand real connection, regardless of whether he had sex early or not. Although I think it'd be healthy if, when he has the desire, he finds a happy, consensual way to fulfill that. I think that would relieve a lot of insecurity, which is common amongst adult men. Um, but also learning to really connect with women, even in a non-sexual way, such that he didn't see them as this strange, foreign, alien creature that um, holds the keys to his self-worth.
Hmm.
And it's a bit vague, but that's the general. Outside of actually just having sex with someone who loves you when you're young, that would be what I would be aiming at. Um, for someone who's past puberty and maybe they've had whatever experience that has led to scarcity, I'd probably say the same thing. It probably takes a little bit more work because you now have this wound,
Hmm.
assuming that you had years of rejection or loneliness or using artificial means to scratch that itch.
Hmm.
Um, Uh, yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, there's the inner work of learning how to connect and not see women as this like strange uh, alien race that you either put on a pedestal or demonize, like a la Angry Red Pill, like
Uh-huh.
to actually see them as regular people. And I would say concurrent with that is actually having the sex that you want and connection you want. I guess they both have to happen now that I'm talking out your answer out loud.
No, this is good.
Yeah.
Um, so what did you discern or learn about women as a coach for men
Hmm.
that you brought with you from One Taste, and then the positive and the negative side, like the difference between feminine magnetism and feminine manipulation, for example, or and maybe it's not as intrinsic as that. Maybe there's some more subtleties. I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, I say high level, and this is like something that I really got from One Taste, as far as like real useful lessons, or even just a way of looking at it is I did take away my moral lens. If you look at, both ends of personal development, like the goddess worshiping side of that, and then the angry red pill people, right? If you put them on a spectrum, both of those extremes um, uh, are saying there's a way that women should be, and then they're not, and then they're either feeling inferior to them or they're like shitting on them, right?
Hmm.
Like that. I mean, I'm speaking in hyperbole, but like you see some version of that a lot. Versus like when I was in One Taste, I saw a lot of what we might call the dark feminine, that the types of behaviors that you would see in a red pill forum complaining about how terrible women are. And the truth is, there is truth to, there's an amoral, like when it comes to sexuality, especially, it doesn't run on morality. Like our sexual instincts are pre-moral. They're from a part of our brains that developed a long time. Is it my end?
All right, well, we're back after a not so commercial break.
Okay.
It's Skip. You were saying it's sexual stuff is from uh, it's a level of the brain before morality.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean, in One Taste, I got enough experiences to kind of take off my moral lens when it came to women, and then recognize like both men and women, especially when it comes to sexuality, attraction, connection, all of these like pre-conscious or pre-rational experiences, like morality doesn't exist. It's just cause and effect. It's just like I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but it is like there is like kind of a dog training element of like we respond to certain things based on our instincts, and that's how it is, right? So there's no use complaining about I mean, both not putting women on a pedestal, but also not saying, oh, they're so terrible. Like both of those are still trying to apply a moral framework, which just doesn't apply to our animal nature. Um, in general terms, that's what I really picked up in One Taste, because you just saw like One Taste for me was kind of like this lab experiment where you got to get a lot of reps in different emotionally charged situations.
Hmm.
Like I got the equivalent of like I don't know, many years of relationships in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, relationship by design,
Yeah.
for example. Yeah.
Yeah.
They that now exists. The spiritual successor of that is the relationship, the 90-day relationship experiment in the Tantra Institute.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of former One Taste people who are like coaching there, and it's real interesting.
The one in New York?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, okay. I didn't know I don't know what they're up to, but yeah, I'm acquainted and friends with some of them.
Yeah, they seem like good people. I coached one of them for a while. So um e- let me ask you just out of curiosity as a fellow author and as a colleague, like how has writing, publishing, promoting the book changed or altered your work or your public perception? Just so curious.
Um, well, I spent a lot of time on the book. I mean, it's been one of my projects for over a decade. And
Oh.
now this last month that it's finally complete, I guess it feels like I mean, there is a void and there is a feeling of what do I do next? Not that I was working on the book all the time, but it was always like in the back of my mind.
Uh-huh.
So there's a certain completion. I am looking at my next book and like trying to decide what I want to do with writing. I think I love writing narrative, but unless I join another cult or have a strange experience, I don't think I will write another nonfiction narrative. My next book will probably be more of like an advice giving book. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I do think probably in the near future I will stop talking about cults, unless something crazy happens, which it could when it comes to this story.
Respect. Um, yeah, well, here's my last curiosity within our hour here. Who do you best serve, and what problems do you like to solve in the lives of, is it primarily men?
Yeah, I coach. I mean, I'm not opposed to coaching women, but yeah, I only coach men as of the last couple of years. Um, Around masculinity, but almost always there's a pain point when it comes to dating or relationships. More recently, more of my clients are either are my age or stage of life. Marriage is on the rocks and they want to reconnect or rekindle the lust or on the brink of divorce. Or I have been coaching guys like, you know, post divorce getting back into dating, but there's always um, there's always the external element of having better connection with women or the woman they're with. But my interest and my methodology is more the quote inner game of it, or how it relates to your life, or how your relationship with your wife is a reflection of your soul in quotes or your emotional landscape, and that of course affects everything in your life.
Huh. And what's the most valuable distinction or frame you can offer to help a man master his inner game in his relationship to the feminine?
Well, I don't know if I could say it in one sentence, but um,
We got like at least 10 minutes. I mean,
no, I know. Well, yeah. I mean, I have a whole book planned on this answer, so I don't know how to put
oh,
it in
cool. So it's a teaser trailer. Yeah.
yeah, I guess yeah. So the next book I'm working on, which will be out at some point next year, is it's called Anima. I'm using a lot of Jung's terminology and the basic idea, which maybe is an answer to this question, that a straight man's relationships with women are a reflection of what's going on within him, which means if you want to have better relationships with a woman or women in general, there's are things you can do about your relationship to yourself internally that will bleed out, so you don't, I mean, I'm very against learning lines or too many external tactics. I think most people into inner work are not. We all know that, like, who you are on the inside really is what matters in the long run, with relating to women sexually, romantically, etc. But then the flip side of that, for example, if a man has self-loathing issues or self-esteem problems or creative impotence or um, any kind of emotional block or shortcoming, it can be worked on in a sense, I believe, with how his relationships with women are. And I have a lot of evidence of that, whether it's like, and I break up the aspects of the feminine into five categories. I won't go through all of them now, but like every guy I meet who has a certain pattern with women, such as he's good for one night stands but nothing else, or he's a great provider but he can't get his partner wet, or anything, any other kind of extreme, he has a certain emotional profile which seems to fit at least this framework that I've developed over the years. Like there's certain personality traits. Like if you ask about the guy who only does one night stands about his personal life, you see the same things, from pickup guy to pickup guy, or from you know um, cold fish provider to fish provider. Like they have the same traits outside of the bedroom or outside of their love life, and I think that's just very interesting. And in the book, I'm trying to tie those two things together.
Huh. Yeah, it's difficult not to discern and start connecting the dots in patterns the more people you serve, huh?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the fun. And if a pattern checks out, then it's something useful.
Yeah.
Hopefully, a framework that can be, employed in a way that you can, get the results you want, whether internally or externally.
So I'm going to go a little vulnerable for me. You're talking about the scarcity. I've been in an interesting spot personally, where my last three relationships, I got engaged, and I'm
Whoa.
not in any of those three relationships anymore. And so I got way turned on to attachment theory. And this whole book back here was just like, oh, ding, 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 seeing the dots light up as I constellated the patterns in
Hmm.
myself, in my own nervous system. And then realizing, oh man, these were all avoidant attached people, to the best of my ability to discern, who I, as a historically anxious attached nervous system, attracted. And after the last breakup, it was a experience of I want to have higher standards, be more careful, be more intentional. Don't go all in with quick sex that then turns into limerence that turns into a relationship, which was historically my pattern.
Hmm.
And what I've seen and discerned in myself in the past 650 or so days without sex, it started as all right, I'm just going to manifest a new partner, and that will happen to be my wife. Then I get back out into the dating world, and my standards, filters, and criteria were stronger and heavier.
Hmm.
And actually, so that you're uniquely equipped to kind of answer where I'm at, and I think it may have some value for the listeners as well. Like my criteria for discerning dysfunction in a person came from the organization.
Hmm.
Was very quick to call out ego and anyone who was operating from anything that looked like shadow. And so our whole philosophy back there, and still to some degree in my coaching, is love confronts dysfunction. Fear comforts in dysfunction, and I'm not here to put a pillow in someone's cage. So,
Hmm.
left and right, what I have found is the moment a woman seems to fall asleep at the wheel of her shadow, her ego occurs as irresponsible, disrespectful, or inconsiderate. I push them aside because I'd rather not be pushed aside later myself through an avoidant discard. And
Hmm.
it's been a sticky, like I've only seriously dated one person since. And my attempt to lovingly invite her deeper into an awareness of what my vision for the relationship was, like, I guess she wasn't bought in enough. But what it's led to is a little bit of the revival of that scarcity. Because I was trained on pickup artistry
Hmm.
initially. And then I went into
Hmm.
landmark and OneTaste and skilled up in a more sensitive sort of way. And there's still a part of me that, like, my whole ignition in my sense of my own realm of possibility and um, empowerment came from after the landmark advanced course. It was like right now from nothing, who I am is the possibility of being Casanova. And I'd go talk to a really attractive woman, and then I'd feel big,
Hmm.
regardless of how it went. Like not sexually per se, but just. And so, as I've embraced having higher standards, what has happened for me is I think I've been starving myself from standards and filters that were too strong and too high. And
Hmm.
it's led to crazy shit. Like I did 7 weeks of a hardcore 3 times a week. Like I'm gonna pump up so that I can look big. And then that triggered my lymphatic system and my liver. And now I'm recovering health-wise from challenges that I've been avoiding for more or less a decade. Um, and
Hmm.
at the bottom of it, I'm just like, it'd be cool to have a girlfriend. She doesn't have to be my wife. And that's where I started. And so I'm sure you have a number of distinctions that could support in this realm because you're in a relationship and you have a child. You're in
Yeah.
it for the long term. So I look to you as like someone who's wise on the other side of the transition from the player fun kind of full self-expressed sexually, which I've done, to a spot of like landing in maturity as a man. I'm curious what you would say to someone in my shoes.
Man, I have a lot of things to say.
All ears.
Well, I'll say one thing is so right before my wife got together, I chose to be celibate for a while because during the pandemic, it I already was feeling diminishing returns from the player life, but during the pandemic, I had like three in a row of the same kind of emotional pattern. I think the pandemic allowed a relationship cycles to happen more condensed because we couldn't really go anywhere. So I was like, oh my God, in 9 months, I've done the same thing 3 times. Like,
Yeah.
and it was the same kind of fun, peak, crash. I was like, I need to take a break from women. So I took a break for 6 months. I won't go into this story, but like, my wife and I were acquainted for years. My future wife, now wife, were acquainted for years. And I saw her post something about celibacy to clear her relationship patterns, and we started talking, and eventually we got together. Um, So anyway, I just want to say like I think it's a great thing to take a break, and then I think it's also very interesting that when you take a break and do inner work, um, when you're faced with the same thing and you have a different emotional response, that's like the best, especially with women. Like that's the best, like clearest, most concrete, undeniable evidence that you've changed. It's like you're repulsed by the thing that used to be your drug. Um, so I just want to say that I think that's great that you had, but then it creates a new problem or a new type of problem that you just mentioned. Um, sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah. See, one of my big secrets with this make love easy thing is with the podcast is sometimes it's like people who, to some degree, intimidate me. Like they have some skill or achievement and like wanting to harvest for the sake of my audience, but through me, really. There would be no personal interest if I didn't have my own questions. And yeah, it's like I've started to believe that one most people are pursuing sexual needs, not realizing that those are the result of or contaminated by unmet spiritual and emotional needs. And so, like, I've discerned myself through that, and I absolutely see what you're saying, and I appreciate it's kind of a indirect acknowledgement. Like, yeah, this is good that you're not just going for what was nourishing to you before, and it wasn't
Yeah, or
junk food.
seeming to nourish you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To invite someone, one of my mentors, he says, "Be careful where you point that thing," and he's kind of pointing to my heart and my cock at the same time, because
Hmm.
as an eight of hearts in Vedic astrology, as a someone who practiced and published in a book of erotic poetry called As Casanova, like I can give real love to someone, and it charms, and especially if they're like insecure, have not fully received the love of their parents, their God, like they'll put me on a pedestal, and then I'll put them on a pedestal, and then suddenly we're codependent on some level. And so it's like I'm free of the initial sparks and like overwhelming limerence of that, but it also feels like yeah, I just don't know where to go from here because almost every woman, and I don't know, it's a mix between self-sabotage, I think, because there are certain women who I could have had a connection or a relationship with. But then my coaching brain goes into, well, have you fully satisfied the needs of your nervous system, your emotional system, your social desires, your spirituality? And like, hey, anything less than your highest choice is self-sabotage. So if you spent 6 months manifesting your wife, like, are you just gonna break that vow and that commitment to go for something because you're hungry? Like, I have all this judgment on myself for even wanting to pursue that. But go ahead.
Because can I ask like these women for some reason you're clear that they're not your future wife?
Every woman I've been with for the past 15 years, more or less, there was always a sense that I could, given my training, theoretically have someone who is more physically attractive. So that's one count.
Mm,
The other count is, and my last partner, I brought her into the spiritual community, and
mhm,
the way that she transformed and sort of transfigured the distinctions that I gave her, it was incredible. And I couldn't get over the experience I had of the depth of intimacy, like the completely open heart, and also the respect and responsibility that was in the container that we had designed. That like once that was over, I was like, okay, well, if I can have that, why would I want anything less?
mm,
So my attempts to invite people into co-creating something like that, well, takes a village to raise a child, they say. Now, maybe that village is the Earth Waking village, and that was why my last relationship thrived. But then her personal distancing of herself from that community and from that realm, like it became not possible to reestablish that. And my distance from that community has me like I've witnessed myself operating more from shadow, more from like
mm,
opportunism and reactivity. And so going back to your original conversation about the book, like I think we need community to thrive. And I haven't had that since I've pushed this community away, number one. And then number two, like I- I'm having trouble discerning like how high should my standards be? Because if a woman doesn't immediately respond to my song and dance of here are the best agreements to have in relationship, here are the coolest distinctions and contexts, let's build this cool thing together. Like, well, I mean, maybe she doesn't care enough. The buy-in that I used to have when I invite women in that direction was sexual limerence chemicals. And
Mm.
so then there's this window where nervous systems are opened and she's like really listening. And then I swoop in with the like, hey, let's do this. You really care right now. We can make something that lasts. But I was choosing women who didn't have the capacity to reciprocate the level of intimacy and commitment that I was willing to devote, that I still am. And
Mm.
so my tender heart, I see the first sign that a woman is not willing to honor what I'm offering her, or doesn't value it, or doesn't see it. I'm just like, well, fuck off, goodbye, not again.
I'll share two anecdotes that I hope will be useful to you and anyone listening, especially if this is relevant. Um, am I coming in clear? I'm getting a
Yeah,
connection unstable.
yeah, yeah.
I am okay.
Back.
Um, yeah. Well, the first is so my pattern is a lot of attachment theory is has been avoidance. So I would get a certain kind of high, similar to what you were saying, where I would be with anxious women typically who, once you got past a certain barrier, there's like a certain devotion and obsession and clinging, which made me feel loved, obviously. So anytime I met a woman who wasn't anxious, I was like, oh, where's the clinging? Even though it would consciously annoy me, it's like, oh, well, there's no clinging, there's no magic, and I can see how I maybe almost self-rejected with secure women because I was like, well, they're not throwing their lives at me. This must not be good. So I don't know if this is relevant to what you're saying, but what came to mind is like maybe what you thought were the initial sparks that were like that's this high bar was actually sugar or fake nutrients perhaps, and like your future secure happy awesome partnership is just not going to have that in the beginning. I don't know. But I will say that to my second anecdote, I didn't have that with my wife. Actually, my wife and I met 4 years before we got together, and I didn't know how to flirt with her. I thought she was really sexy, and I thought I was really impressed. And I even thought I would like to date a woman like that one day. But whereas with every other slightly anxious woman I met, and I was traveling around the world, like, and I would just know how to flirt. I would feel very confident being sexual and flirty and charming and inviting them. I didn't know how to talk to my wife at all because I only knew how to play an avoidant man's game with an anxious woman. So there was kind of a so drunken highs that I had from a more insecure place, I think.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, that so on the one hand, the false positive of thinking that this is like real love when really it's just what it felt like to be jumping into another dysfunctional situation, or like, hey, her wound matches my wound, to quote Neil Strauss from The Truth.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I forget who said this. I think it's a cliche, like if you experience love at first sight, run. Or
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, something. Maybe Neil Strauss included this in a book too, although I don't think he coined that. But yeah, it's that idea.
Yeah. So there's that. And then the other side is like, if all someone knows or has known is that avoidant, anxious game, it's gonna take something for them to discern and discover what it looks like to actually have someone who's available to play a different game.
Yeah,
What did it take for
and I'll
you?
say,
Yeah.
well, one, I was like very frustrated at my COVID relationships following the same exact script. So
Uh,
it kind of like, and then honestly, celibacy, like if I was still sleeping around, which I had been for many years, basically until this period of celibacy, if I had been sleeping around, I don't think I would have had the space or would have given the attention to the growing connection with my wife which we were both in lockdown, so we were kind of falling in love over WhatsApp. So there's no sex. I wasn't having sex with anybody, and I got to just pay attention to the connection. And we'd even talk about like this feels like a different way to fall in love because there's no sex, and also we're voice noting a lot and doing Zoom calls. Like we're not one, the sex chemicals aren't there, but also I guess there wasn't, or I gave this the opportunity for a not drunken romance to develop. Whereas I think in the past, maybe I would have been like, oh, this is boring. Nothing's happening. That's crazy. Let me go keep sleeping with wild, anxious women, or
Huh.
something like that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I also had a WhatsApp relationship with a woman from Costa Rica,
Mm,
and she was almost undoubtedly avoidant in retrospect. But yeah, it was the traditional arc of launch and depth and sexual chemistry, and then discard.
mm.
What other like trainings or sources of wisdom beyond one taste, which you've emphasized in your public perception lately, but like what else would you recommend to grow into a mature man like you have?
Well, I think it would depend on where a man is lacking. I mean, I did for a long time recommend a lot of people check out Ista, Tantra, like Neo Tantra. I have both very positive and very negative things to say. I won't list the negatives, but to be in a community where being sexual and upfront and vulnerable is the norm, I think is great. I mean, that's the experience I had in One Taste without like the really enmeshing cult aspects. Um, like those kinds of community, or even like to be a part of like sex positive communities for a period of time where you get to experience like ex social niceties around them as you would in the normal dating pool. I think for most guys, that's a healing thing. Um, Specifically, if a guy has like the more common insecurities, but it would kind of depend. Like if someone's like hyper avoidant, or they've spent too much time doing red pill stuff, or maybe they spent too much time doing spiritual things like that, I might direct them elsewhere. Actually, to a lot of like guys who've done a lot of the heart opening, softer spiritual work, I do send them a red pill book. I've told a lot of my clients who fit this bill to chest too literally, you'll start to hate women. But there's also some hard-hitting truths for the guy who's too soft. Like, yeah, you need to recognize that women have a certain beast, and if you and just like any animal, we respond to certain things, right? Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'll actually say, really big picture, and this is my own personal work, is getting in touch with nature. I mean, it sounds cliche, but like taking care of a garden, taking care of animals, chopping wood. Actually, horses have been my biggest thing. I know it's not accessible to most people. They can't just like go ride a horse or learn how to ride horses. Man, if there's one thing, I'll just say like, if there's one thing that if I had had these experiences as a boy, I'm sure I wouldn't have any insecurities, or 99% of my insecurities would be gone, and that's riding horses. You know,
Huh.
might seem like a non sequitur, but like it teaches all the emotional or energetic things you get in all these great workshop settings, but with a creature that will trample you if you do the wrong thing, which you can say is a metaphor for women in some ways. So anyway, maybe that's not the most useful or actionable thing for most listeners, but that's my plan for my children and my son especially.
That's awesome. That's another book, honestly.
Yeah, maybe. My plan is I really, I mean, some people hope to get the Porsche or whatever. Like I really just want four horses. Like that's what I want to make $1 million for. Like to just have lots of horses. That would be the ultimate flex for me.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, your energy, your conversation, your inspiration. What would you like to leave people with in this realm of dating, intimacy, sexuality? And where can we find more of you? How can we get more of you other than the
Yeah.
book?
Yeah. Thanks so much. This was fun. I hope I wasn't shivering too much. It's really cold where I
Oh
am right now.
man,
I didn't
no
realize.
worries.
I feel like I've I've been shivering this whole. I'm turning all of my attention to Substack. It just hold on, my connection's breaking again, I think.
You're
Am I
back.
still audible? I'm back. Okay. Um, all my work is on Substack, writing excerpts of my next book. My podcast is also on Substack. I might delete Instagram in the near future. I'm not sure. I'm kind of leaning towards that for various reasons. And then advice for men. I mean, I don't know if I have like a very general thing other than the things I said. But well, actually, there is one thing. This is like a recent reminder for me is that, and I don't know how to say it other than the most cliche way, but self-worth really is everything. Before learning skills, before learning mindset training, before even habits, your love for yourself. I feel so corny saying it, but like I got this reminder recently. It's like, oh, this matters more than anything. Like you really need to have a one. If you have a wonderful relationship with yourself and your own emotions, it will eventually lead to the right actions that will lead to the relationships you want with women or whoever you date.
Simple enough.
And I got an artificial version of that in One Taste too. That was the chapter with my mother figure. Like she kind of gave me a strings attached version of self love, which benefited me, but then also had a dark side. But if you could do that without the strings attached, it'll be greatly beneficial to you.
Sweet. Beautiful. Well, thank you again, sir. And
Yeah,
to all those listening, please like, share, subscribe, and follow this man.
yeah. Thanks, Liz.
Go make love easy.